Hello, this is Grow Your Power, presenting skills and experiences and ideas of homesteading. For anyone who wants to save some money, be independent, and be aligned with nature. I am your hostess, Anne Greenfield. Today my show is The Challenges of Technology. And it's not as though I'm an expert on technology, but I have this perspective of living off-grid for 30 years with very little technology. I will also be interviewing Stuart Goodnic, an engineering manager and a meditator. Imagine 5,000 years ago, a half dozen women are squatting near a fire. It's autumn, and you all have been out gathering grain seed, bay nuts, and elderberries. A beautiful start to a breakfast of porridge. The old trusty tool for grinding this up is a stone pestle and a hollowed-out rock. It's your turn to grind. You chant happily while you work the mortar and pestle, and you breathe in the cool but brilliant autumn day. You glance over and see your man on the other side of the fire. He's pounding hard a hammerstone on another stone, breaking off flakes of stone, most likely preparing a spear for tomorrow's deer hunt. Good, bison from last week is almost gone. Feeling warmth and gratitude for your man, you rise to plant kisses on his neck. He smiles and reaches down for a gift for his woman. He'd made a flintstone awl for sewing hides together. You are delighted, feeling the beveled handle fit right into your hand and exclaiming over the perfect point at the end. 3 children sit near the fire, laughing, clacking bones together in a heated rhythm. Music, food, clothing, shelter, with only stones and bones. Imagining this scene, it might appear to us 21st century folk as difficult, deprived, and actually hellish. But it must have also been a little fun, because this lifestyle, the Stone Age, survived for 3 million years. Unimaginable. 3 million years. Without hot showers, no TV screen, no cell phone. I actually believe I could have been happy living that way. Actually, you know, nature provides all our essentials free. Air, water, soil and food, heat and light from the sun, all free. Nothing else is really needed for our survival. The human does have an inventive psyche, but for those 3 million years, just natural, biodegradable materials satisfied their needs. Now, only 5,000 to 8,000 years after the Stone Age, with agrarian and industrial revolutions, literacy and science, and now the introduction of digital technology, nanotechnology to come, the human has invented trillions of objects and tools, hundreds of which most humans buy and use and feel are essential. When I lived off-grid as a homesteader, I was proud to be able to live with very few things. I was not Stone Age, but the whole gamut of electrical appliances and tools was out of my range, and instead I used what I'll call hand technologies. Hand food grinders, shovels, hoes, hand saws, and hand screwdrivers. I could make most things that I needed, like a basket for carrying or storage. I could grow my own food and preserve foods for winter. I made some of our clothing or shopped at Goodwill. I would go to a store to buy something and then realize by looking at it that I could make it, and I'd walk out of the store. It's really possible to live with very little. Enough is a good feeling to find. In my new town life of 8 years, I am personally aggrieved to see stuff everywhere. Cars and trucks, wires and buildings, advertising and lights. And I know houses are well equipped with many electrical and digital technologies and decorated with many items of comfort and beauty. I see concrete everywhere, and I think about how much life has been impacted by all the concrete in the world. Many houses are huge, with so much unnecessary indoor space and impacting so much land underneath. Walking around town, I see barely a natural horizon. In fact, just tokens of nature. A tree here and there, a small landscaped yard, a flower pot in an office. City dwellers are the most deprived of nature. And out of an 8 billion world population, 55% is urban. The man-made world is big. On the contrary, living on a large piece of land for 30 years, one day a week I would take the whole day away from my chores, sun hat on, bottle of water and notebook in hand, and I'd wander, noticing the tadpoles in ditches, the tiny scarlet pimpernels coming up in the fields, the feathery ferns in the ravines. One day I remember looking across a meadow, way up to the tops of the green fir trees, with the blue sky around it all. I was struck with awe. It's hard to explain it in words, but I was suddenly quieted by something enveloping me above and around me, something so majestic, and I a humble part of it all. I would wish this awe to everyone. I think we need this perspective to keep our humanness in check. So I'm here to encourage us to go simpler in our consumption of commercial goods and clear some of the clutter we don't really need. Expose nature. Buy less, but have enough. I want to look at some of our current technologies and appraise both their positive and negative effects. As Marshall McLuhan pointed out years ago, some effects of technologies are embedded deeply, hidden away from our superficial perceptions. For instance, what we give up in body health and power. Many inventions are aimed at the value we put on ease. An elevator or escalator makes it easier to walk up or down stairs. But in the process, we use our body less and lose the skill and power it takes to climb steps. Another example. Walking on concrete is easier than walking on rough dirt, but it takes away the resiliency in our feet from flexing them over uneven terrain. Most of our technologies make us into more sedentary beings, and our lower extremity muscles suffer from disuse. I like following a natural way as opposed to a technological way as much as possible, and I like keeping my body moving and working. Another value that has created technology, or perhaps technology has created it, is speed, time-saving devices. It takes much less time to use a bread-making machine than to knead dough by hand. But what we lose is sensation, the experience of that dough in our hands and fingers. Slow food has been a movement for years. I love slow food projects. Taking it from the ground upward is the best. This last summer, a friend and I conspired to plant about 600 square feet of field corn. The bounty came off in dozens of multicolored cobs: purple, red, mustard, green. A delight just to uncover the colors of each cob by hand husking them. After that, we hung the cobs in my shed for a month or so, and then dekerneled a bunch by using the back of a spoon, and we set the kernels to boil in lime water so the fibrous hulls would dislodge. We then sieved them, hand ground them, and came up with the most delicious, sweet-smelling masa dough. We pressed it right then and there into fresh tortillas for a tortilla dinner of 6. Fun, with a job for everyone. Speed, yes, cars instead of walking, computer emails instead of handwritten letters, airplanes over train travel. I'm not dismissing any of these technologies at the moment. I enjoy using many of them. But I notice how much fast has become part of us. Perhaps you, like I, feel more anxiety and stress when I am in hurry mode. And there have been many times lately when I have stopped myself in hurry mode and said, "Why am I hurrying? There's really no reason for it at the moment." Someone I read noted that much of our lives swing in a compulsive frenzy these days. Technologies are in part a cause of this. Beginning with the Industrial Revolution and factory work, efficiency became important. It meant greater profits. Perhaps we should try incorporating some slow activity in our lives to see what effect it has on our psyches. One way to slow life down is to sit quietly in a nature site for even 5 minutes, or visit a friend instead of emailing her. Use a hand technology. Prepare fava beans for dinner, a 4-step process. That'll slow you down. The effect of our industrial, oil, and electrical technologies on the earth. We all live by the essential forces of nature: earth, air, water, fire. And all of these elements are best used in their healthiest state, obviously. When car, plane, train emissions foul the air, we must consider these to be unhealthy technologies. Form great areas of lifelessness in our oceans. We must stop using them, or find a constructive, harmless way of returning the waste back into nature. Without a way of returning technology waste to the natural world, we defy the laws of creation. Quote, "All of creation feeds something else in its own death." Unquote. This is a quote from As in the Heart, So in the Earth by Pierre Rabhi. This small book talks of the desertification that has happened in North African communities because of modern technologies and values. The book also gives good example of how exactly the desert land can be reclaimed with natural forces. A good question to ask is, from where does the power come for a specific technology? Power in the earliest days mainly came from just our bodies. our body machine is empowered by the breath of air, the circulation of water, the heat of burning the fuel of food that grows on the earth. All waste of this power can be returned to the earth. And with a little rest, we can renew and sustain the source of power. A mechanical machine such as a car uses petroleum products for its power. It takes these oils from the earth, changes them, and makes them so they are not returnable in a form that nature can use. The source is not renewable and thus disappears in time. In order to sustain the well-being of the earth, we need to think about the power sources and waste products of any technology we invent or buy. So, what happened after the Stone Age? Ceramic technology, clay pots, and art. Then humans learned to smelt metals. First bronze, then in 800 BC, iron. Lots more products were being produced. But with the Industrial Revolution in 1800, factories produced en masse and people left farms to become factory employees. Electrical technologies began to appear in the 1820s, and the electronic age started in the early 1900s. Since 1900, there have been more advances in technology than in the whole of our previous history. Air flight, atomic power, antibiotics, internal combustion, steam power, chemical technologies, geoengineering, plastics technology, digital. Marshall McLuhan, in the book Understanding Media, describes how every technology has changed us as humans and changed the way we relate to each other. He cites hidden effects, for example, of television. He saw that just in the act of watching television, irregardless of the content, people became corporate peer group people. They lost interest in being individuals. People began to obsess over what the group knows, feeling as it does, acting with it, not apart. Television and now digital technologies have aided in the art of advertising. Product information can be spread widely and quickly. Television accelerated the movement of consumerism that started in the 1920s. Corporate factories needed to survive after World War I by creating more peacetime goods. And a most clever man emerged to help, Edward Bernays. He created outrageous ad campaigns appealing to emotions and insecurities. And he created non-essential needs in his audiences. In the 1920s, national economic progress began to be touted. Be American and buy things. I became incensed learning about this conscious creation of consumerism. It was built on the philosophy of, quote, we can manipulate the masses according to our will without their knowing it. And, quote, we need things consumed, burned up, worn out, replaced, and discarded at an ever-increasing rate. The challenge of technology, I think, is to increase our awareness of our bodies, of our values, of the effects of any technology on our culture, or on our social dynamics, or on the earth. I would like now to present an interview I had with Stuart Goodnic. Stuart will continue talking of the effects of technology especially of our current electrical and electromagnetic technologies. Stuart is an engineering manager at Parker Hannekin in Rohnert Park, which is a diversified industrial corporation. The corporation produces things such as electrical components and controls, machines to effect automation, DNA analysis machines. So my first question for you, Stuart, is in dealing with electricity and electromagnetic energy, it seems to be one of our cleaner energies. Can you explain what kind of power or fuel is used in its production?
Certainly. Well, first let me say I'm happy to be here on the show with you. This is a wonderful opportunity. And to answer your question, I mean, electricity is generated in lots of different forms. Primarily, there are generators that will produce electricity. So you can think of a generator as a motor that's run in reverse. You put power into a motor, the motor turns. If you turn the motor, you generate power. So that's the consequences of the interaction of a magnetic field with an electric coil. So electrical power typically will come from generator sources, certainly electrical power that runs our grids. So those generator sources can range from clean to dirty. You can have hydroelectric power, where the force of gravity acting on a body of water is turning a turbine, which turns the motor, which causes the electricity to be generated. That's certainly clean. And then there's coal plants, which will burn coal to produce heat, to produce steam, to produce pressure, which then turns the motor and produces the electricity. And similarly, nuclear power operates in the same way. It uses a thermonuclear reaction to generate heat, to produce steam, to turn a turbine and generate electricity. So electricity in and of itself can be produced by relatively clean ways and relatively dirty ways. And today now we have a new class of technology, solar cells, solar electric, and that's probably the biggest growth area for us, in which the photovoltaic process, in which light hits a silicon substrate or other semiconductor substrates, and the action of the photons of light kick loose electrons, which ultimately flow as electricity. And that energy then can be produced and stored in the form of batteries and produce electricity for homes and for the grid. And so that's even cleaner still. But when we talk about solar electricity, we also have to take into account the costs of the production of the semiconductors and the solar equipment in order to provide that clean energy. And sometimes those processes require energy from more traditional sources. So, nothing is completely clean and nothing is completely dirty. And as such, we have to make intelligent decisions at a policy level as to what kind of world we want to produce.
Talk to me about dematerialization.
Yeah, so I've been thinking in preparation for this show about the nature of technology and the nature of our relationship to technology and what that means for living a good life. Because besides my technology work, I also am actively a member and a teacher in a meditation community. And so for me, the most important thing to me is the questions about how am I living and how am I inhabiting my body and what is my relationship to the world around me. So when I read some of the biggest advocates of technology today, what I'd call the real cheerleaders, these typically are very successful Silicon Valley types who have see nothing but good in the elaboration of technology and look at things like AI from the positive side of what it's going to do for us. That's AI as artificial intelligence, as opposed to the negative consequences. The biggest cheerleaders will often talk about this concept of dematerialization. And dematerialization to them is what you see in large evolving platforms, technology platforms, that suddenly achieve a level of scale that begins to influence people on macro levels in society. So a few examples of this, of dematerialization. If you look at Uber, which is the ride-on-demand service. It's an example of dematerialization because prior to Uber, in order to get a transportation service, you would interact with, for instance, a taxi company or a bus service. There's some level of people-to-people interaction, but there's also a certification process. There's a kind of an assurance of the quality and consistency of the service. With Uber, that becomes dematerialized, and lots of different individuals suddenly participate in the ride-sharing concept, and the infrastructures that existed before to support that kind of thing dissolve away.
Right, and you were mentioning Amazon. That seems like
so Amazon's a good one because Amazon is probably one of the biggest examples of dematerialization, where prior to Amazon, in order to acquire things for ourselves, we would typically have to go to a store. We would have to take our bodies into a vehicle, go to a store, interact with people, look at things, touch things with our hands, and then make a purchase decision.
Right.
With Amazon, now you go to a screen, you can see things virtually, and sometimes the renditions are very positive and very, graphic and three-dimensional, but you're still mediated through this technology, and you can then make an instantaneous purchase. And so the friction associated with the purchase now is reduced entirely, so that the distance between the impulse and the fulfillment of the impulse has been reduced to almost nothing, for good or bad. It can be convenient, but it can also drive a certain kind of relationship to things that has unintended consequences. So the whole infrastructure, the whole retail infrastructure is being dematerialized. Now, I am one of the co-founders of Many Rivers Books and Tea in Sebastopol, and so I'm certainly acutely aware of what's happened in the book industry. As a small specialty store, we're a spiritual bookstore, we're able to have a niche where people come to the store because they actually want communication. They want some sort of, you might say, curating of the book, someone who knows something about the content of the book so that they can get some recommendation. The human-to-human interaction is why people come into our store. But
that's the thing I see, is that we're cutting down on the human interaction.
Absolutely. But then there's interesting consequences. Like we notice that now there is this concept of print on demand, and on print on demand, it's much easier for us, and Amazon provides services for this, where it's much easier for you as an author to produce a book, have Amazon be the publisher effectively, and the cost for printing is only realized when they print out 10 copies. And so now, instead of doing a edition of thousands of copies of a book, you can do 10 copies and you just order it online. So this concept of dematerialization is an interesting one because it's a two-edged sword. You eliminate unnecessary bureaucracy, but you also dematerialize your own interaction with how you bring stuff into your world. So instead of bringing the whole body into the process, we're just really going from impulse to head to screen. Another example of this that we see in the political sphere is social media. Because social media is really dematerializing the human-to-human contact.
Right.
Where when humans come together and bodies are next to bodies, there's a different quality of interaction than when people are responding to Twitter. Even at a deeper level, there's a tendency when bodies are together, almost instinctively, we want to harmonize. Now, it's not always the case because there's certainly threat modalities, but typically when people are together, our instincts as a good herd animal is to harmonize and to find accommodation. Social media does not promote that because social media is arising more at the impulse level of emotion, unexamined emotion and thought, and so there's a tendency to accentuate difference. And
Interesting.
So in our society as a whole, this just dematerialization of social contact has the unintended consequence that it, as it were, materializes difference and discord. And we see that being played out in the political world, because the polarization of conversation is so acute now, and the possibility of insulating yourself from alternative points of view is so easy that it almost creates irresolvable differences in communities, because we're literally living in different universes. And it's not, I mean, every technology, getting back to the technology question, is a two-edged sword. I mean, social media has been an occasion for me to be in contact with people that I wouldn't have normally been in contact with. Honestly and realistically, that contact is very limited, and I like it's more exists in my imagination, so that I see a feed from a high school friend of mine, and I imagine I'm in contact, and maybe if I like something or put a heart on something that he posts, I feel like, hey, we're actually interacting. So, is that good? Is that bad? I don't know. But it's different than actually going to the trouble of moving my body into a context where I'm actually with this person and in communication. So we tend to, with technology and the mediation of technology, settle for a mediation in our experience that is not the same. It's experientially not the same. There are consequences that we don't see, because we're seduced by the convenience that technology provides for us.
Exactly.
And so it's a hard question, because I'm by no means a saint in these regards. I use Amazon, even though, with every use I'm aware that I am promoting a system that is dematerializing human contact. And yet, what's my justification? Well, I'm really busy. So I really don't have the time to go to the market, or I don't have the time to go to a specialty store to get this, that, or the other.
Right.
So in that sense, I'm complicit in this problem. If I examine, well, why? What is it? What is the nature of that excuse of why am I so busy? And one of the reasons I'm busy is that for the work that I do, I spend a lot of hours working. And so the rest of my life is sort of crammed into the interstices of a relatively expanded work week. Well, why am I so busy at work? Well, it's interesting, because the technologies that we have at work, like email, to me, are technologies that gave the promise of productivity, and yet the reality is that we're more busy than we ever were. And the quality of that busyness is probably degraded, so that the net productivity in business, certainly in North America today, has flattened, which is a big concern of economists. Like, well, why has our productivity not risen when we have all these productivity tools that we've been provided? And the reality is that I spend most of my day going through email, because the cost of communication has been dematerialized. The communication for me, when I receive emails from people, if something's important, someone has to make it important, and then all of a sudden there's kind of a sorting of what things are more important than others. With email, people can just send an email and get it off, and they've checked off a box, but it may not be the most important thing that they're dealing with. So there's a lot more activities, but not necessarily more productivity in the workplace as a result. So another example of dematerialization is when I started my career over 30 years ago, there were administrative assistants who would do things like book travel for managers and things like that. Those are all gone in the kind of workplaces I work in. There's a lot of work that I do that originally was done by other people, and in the interest of saving money and reducing headcount and reducing costs, I no longer, I have to do that myself. But if I do that myself, then that's another task on top of the other things that I was doing. So I've gotten busier. Sales, general, and administrative costs have gone down, but my productivity hasn't gone up.
I see. What about the things that you produce at the company where you work? And they sound quite worthwhile.
They are, and like I said, I'm not opposed to technology. I just think we need to examine technology and the consequences of it. So, in the company I work for, the corporation is a large corporation. As I said, it's a $12 billion corporation. It has lots of different groups that produce different technologies. There's a big aspect of in aerospace. And the products that are produced in aerospace, among other things, include the electrohydraulic actuators that run the flaps on an airplane. So, very necessary technology for the world that we live in, and in general does good. And as a corporation, I also want to mention that not all corporations are evil, or they're not all like what we think. The worst thoughts we have about oil companies, or the worst thoughts we have about pharmaceutical companies, which I think often are somewhat exaggerated to accentuate a few bad actors. But the corporation I work for, large corporation, is run on highly ethical principles. One of the reasons I work there is, they have a vice president of integrity in the corporation to bring forth a set of values so that people fair deal with each other, with our suppliers, with our customers. There's an integrity in the organization that I respect, and it's a publicly traded financial institution that gets pressure from Wall Street and always has to fight back the risk of investors who will try to take over a company and basically sell off the assets for a greater profit. So it's like the corporate leaders are pressured to conform to expectations of Wall Street, because if they don't, they're not fulfilling the articles of incorporation, and an investor could essentially make a case and try to and this happens in businesses all the time. So it's like even the top corporations, just by their very structure, are required to behave in some of the ways that we don't think are necessarily in the larger community interest. But for my corporation...
Very interesting. I appreciate hearing a different side to the corporate story.
Yeah. A lot of the products that we produce in the division I work in are used in factory automation. So when people are automating manufacturing lines, they need to make a widget move from point A to point B in order to do something. It could be, if you're cutting panes of glass, you need to have a sheet of glass moving along a conveyor, and then you need to have a very accurate knife be positioned while the thing is moving to make a cut in such a way that it comes out straight. Mm-hmm. So that kind of motion coordination with a knife, a cutting blade, is run by linear actuators, motors, control electronics, all working in symphony in order to perform a very accurate operation to have a straight edge on the glass. So that's one example. So glass cutting is an example.
A tribute to the intelligence of the human being.
It really is. And interestingly, these problems used to be solved mechanically. You'd have very, very complex mechanical systems with gears and belts and pulleys to do the same thing. The beauty of the electromechanical solution is that you can reset up for a different operation with a press of a button, whereas in the old days you'd have to have the line down and take a week to refit the pulleys and the gears in order to go from a large pane of glass to a small pane of glass or something like that. Mm-hmm. And so one of the things that's happened in the introduction of electromechanical solutions in factory automation, and this is a story that's been playing out for the last 40 years, is the increased ability to produce smaller lots of goods economically and to produce a lot of different variety. And the direction that's moving in the factory process is, whereas in the old days, someone would have to make a run of a million widgets, put them on the shelf somewhere, and then people would buy them. Today, it's almost to the point where as a consumer, I can have a completely customized product whether it's a pane of glass or whether it's a piece of clothing or something like that, and it's produced with my order, and the production lines are so automated that they're able to, without any cost of resetting up, adapt to produce something that's different. Mm-hmm. And so that's another example of dematerialization. We're dematerializing the resistance associated with a customized product. Another class of our products are used in electrification of vehicles, where, as we know, the use of internal combustion engines is more and more problematic because of pollution, because of anti-idling laws. So an example of this, you'll see that in the old days, if let's say a PG&E truck is sitting in your neighborhood and they have to do some work on a power line, the hydraulic actuators that actually lift the boom so that the technician can actually go to the connections on the power pole were traditionally driven by an internal combustion engine that's running and keeping pressure in a hydraulic circuit so that you have this highly pressurized fluid that can move these cylinders and cause this high force lift of this boom. That's great, except the problem is that you have an internal combustion engine running all the time, and you have to keep that pressure up. And so in California in particular, but other states are following suit, there are anti-idling laws, which means that if a truck is not just moving from point A to point B, you don't want the internal combustion engine sitting there, because it's not an efficient speed range for that engine, and it's just spewing pollutants into the air. So if you limit the idling, then you have to solve the problem differently. And so what they do today with electrification is you'll have a battery bank that's charged, and the internal combustion engine may run a generator to keep that battery bank charged. But then you'll have a motor connected to the battery bank, and that motor is connected to a pump, and that pump is sending fluid into a isolated hydraulic circuit. And when you need the power, and only when you need the power to lift the boom, the electricity will turn the motor, cause the pressure of liquid to go into the cylinder and lift the boom up. Mm-hmm. And so in that way, you only use the power when you need it, and it's much more efficient, and you don't have to keep the internal combustion engine running.
I see that a lot of current technologies are dealing with ways of creating things that have less impact on the environment, and that's good. I wonder about the body, the human body, because I see that most technologies are removing the body from the process.
Yes.
And for everything we gain in ease of a convenience, for instance, we've lost the power and the activity of the body.
Absolutely.
And there's something there that needs to be salvaged.
Yeah, and this to me is the central question, and we started this discussion with this elaboration of dematerialization, and the ultimate form of dematerialization is removing the body. That's essentially what dematerialization means.
Wow.
And I think that the challenge for us as people, in terms of what ultimately satisfies us, what ultimately fills our cravings just as beings in bodies, is body-to-body contact, or work with the body is essential to that deeper calm and that deeper peace which is available to us. So if I meditate, the body is active. I have to hold a position. I'm in the body. If my thinking subsides to some extent, what's left is a generic sense of being in a body. I'm not going elsewhere. When my thoughts stop, I'm in the body. If you're out gardening, you are doing work with the body, and there's this direct interaction with you, with the plants, with the soil, and when you partake of the fruits of that labor, there's a connectivity that is not available when I go to the supermarket.
Exactly. My making fires for heat I love doing it. It's just such a connection with the element of fire,
Right.
and the materials of fire, and learning about the trees and the wood and
Right.
body action.
And that's the downside of all of this dematerialization and the seduction of the convenience that technology provides, because technology creates the urgency in our time that requires technology to be the solution to the problem of time that we have. It's kind of a, if, as you've described in your own life, you've lived off the grid in a communal setting where really all you had to worry about was how you produce and how you maintain the environment for yourself and those around you. Your problem of time wasn't really, doesn't present in the way that the problem of time that I was just relating about. I don't have enough time to do all the things I want to do.
Right.
Because there's a whole bunch of things that I want to do that are a consequence of the way that I live. That's completely mediated by technology.
Right, and I've been reading a bit about the Industrial Revolution, and it seems like that was when technology started to speed things up. Just the fact of the way the factories that were created in order to produce technological things, and the way they employed people to do that. It was a faster pace. It was all towards efficiency. And so,
yes,
to me, technology embodies this efficiency and speed.
Yeah, it's true. And, it's an interesting question as to what the direction of all this is. Because even if you go back to the prior to the Industrial Revolution, I mean, we had 10,000 years prior, we had the agricultural revolution,
right.
And that changed drastically the conditions by which human beings related to their environment
And to each other.
to each other. I mean, it was like the birth of hierarchical systems and the birth of acquisition of wealth and the subjugation of labor and the, as it were, dematerialization of personhood. And so, in that sense, all of these innovations produce certain benefits and they produce certain consequences. And the best we can do as participants in these systems is to be absolutely conscious of who we are and what our actions are doing in the larger context, and make personally responsible decisions for ourselves and the world around us.
What do you see as far as the proliferation of electromagnetic energy and where it might go?
I have differing views on that. I don't think electromagnetic energy in and of itself is a bad thing, right? And I think some of the health concerns are extremely over-exaggerated. Our society, and our psyches tend to magnify the things that we're frightened about that seem to be out of our control and minimize the very real dangers that apparently seem to be in our control, like riding in a car from, just even in Sebastopol.
Right.
So lifestyles that electrification and electricity and the the 5G antennas all over the place will produce for us are better subjects of inquiry than I think the actual physics of the electromagnetic beam patterns that we're subject to. And, having 5G is great in the sense that now you have higher bandwidth at a lower energy and hence lower health impact. But it means that everywhere I go, I now can be connected to high bandwidth internet, which means that I basically have a television in my hand no matter where I am. I was just reading something recently that came across work. Came through our aerospace group, and it's a Uber prospectus on flight by on demand. So they're looking at these things. I mean, it's a ways off, but they're looking at vertical takeoff airplanes or mini airplanes that can be used for commuters. And I think, well, that'd be awfully convenient, to be able to go from, like, Sebastopol to San Francisco, and that would create lots of interesting opportunities for changing the pattern of work. But then as I go out in my backyard and look at the trees and look at the sky, imagining now suddenly this, these constant little airplanes flying overhead and buzzing, even if they're relatively silent, it's like the experience of the sky is going to be different, because we'll never be quite have the same spaciousness that we might be able to enjoy when we're out in a country setting. And so, maybe by way of conclusion, I would say that, from a meditation point of view, what I think is most important and is important for people, and if I could wave a wand and introduce this kind of teaching into primary education, it's practices that bring us into our bodies with intention. So meditation that allows you to be present to the body, feeling of being in the body, musical practice where you're in the body, all the things that bring us into the body in a, not even an active way, but just in a way of presence, I think gives us some of the tools to discern more clearly the choices that we make when we interact with technology. And it doesn't mean that the technology is bad. Technology is kind of neutral. It's like what we do with it.
Exactly.
And so you can put to use social media, you can put to use Amazon even in creative and wonderful ways, and at the same time you can be responsible about how much of yourself you give over to the convenience that's being offered by these technologies.
Good thinking. Thank you very much, Stuart.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
Very clear interview.
Thank you.
I honor the human desire to create and discover, but I retain my original perspective to be wary of technology. By letting technology do our work and electromagnetic technology be our eyes, ears, and mind, we are challenging our innate humanness, our innate powers. My show, Grow Your Power, promotes making things oneself. Should you do this, make your own rake or broom, your own pizza dough, you'll experience a kind of integrity, creativity, and a love for your creation which you won't experience with a bought item. Technology is here to stay. I can, however, choose where I put my energy. I choose to support my humanness, my natural self that feels powerful in itself. I choose to engage with nature and be one of its caretakers. I support a humanity that remembers how to make deep human connections with others. I want our evolution to go human. Grow your power, I say.